Hello, my name is Megan Groff, and today I will be presenting on the cultural impact of the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Ratified in 1920, this amendment guaranteed women the right to vote in the United States and marked a major turning point in American democracy. This moment was not just a legal change, but the result of decades of activism and social transformation. In this presentation, I will analyze this event through both historical and philosophical perspectives to show how it reflects broader societal changes and continues to influence our understanding of equality and rights today. The 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution represents a critical expansion of democratic participation in the United States. Before its ratification, women were excluded from voting, meaning they had no direct influence over laws, policies, or leaders. This exclusion highlights a major contradiction in a democracy that claimed to represent all citizens. In this presentation, I will argue that the amendment both reflected ongoing social changes, such as growing demands for gender equality, and actively reshaped society by expanding political participation. Using both historical and philosophical perspectives allows us to better understand not just what happened, but why it mattered then and why it still matters now.
The 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, the one that guaranteed women the right to vote, was ratified in 1920. But the truth is, women had been voting in American elections for long before that. In the early years of the Republic, for example, there were some places where women voted, in the state of New Jersey until 1807. But in most cases, women were denied the right to vote in the 19th century. They started agitating for the right to vote openly and in public in the late 1840s and early 1850s after meetings in places like Seneca Falls in New York. During the Civil War period, women were involved in the fight against slavery and the fight to save the Union. After the Civil War, leaders like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony thought that their fight to end slavery would get them included in the amendments like the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment that guaranteed the rights to former slaves, and they lost. It was a devastating blow to their cause. And so they reorganized themselves in a long campaign for suffrage. Sometimes they did this on a state-by-state or territory-by-territory basis, especially effective out west. Then there were women led by Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton who organized the National Women's Suffrage Association. They were fighting to change the Constitution. Sometimes they fought in the courts. They actually tried to vote. Susan B. Anthony got herself arrested at one point doing that. Ultimately, these fights converged at the beginning of the 20th century and during the era of World War I. There was a serious campaign to try to change the Constitution. They had what they called silent sentinels posted outside the White House with protest signs. Those silent sentinels were arrested by municipal authorities and imprisoned. It was a stark moment in the history of women's rights, women being imprisoned and in some cases force-fed. Eventually, women gained the right to vote in states like New York. They convinced Woodrow Wilson to support women's suffrage. And finally, by 1919, the Congress had endorsed, after much struggle, this proposed amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And women began voting wholesale across the country in the presidential election of 1920.
The women's suffrage movement began in the mid-1800s as part of a broader push for social reform. A key moment was the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, where activists created the Declaration of Sentiments, which boldly stated that men and women should be equal. Leaders like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton played critical roles in organizing campaigns, delivering speeches, and advocating for change. These women faced significant opposition, including legal barriers and social criticism, yet they remained committed. Their work laid the foundation for future generations and shows how long-term activism is often necessary to achieve meaningful social change. To fully understand the importance of the amendment, we must consider the social conditions of the time. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, women were expected to focus on domestic responsibilities, such as caring for the home and raising children. They had limited access to higher education, professional careers, and political involvement. Because they could not vote, their perspectives were largely excluded from decisions that affected society. This reflects a broader system of inequality that limited women's opportunities and reinforced traditional gender roles. The suffrage movement challenged these norms and pushed for a more inclusive society. The 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution was officially ratified on August 18, 1920, after decades of persistent effort. The process was not easy, as many people opposed women's suffrage, arguing that it would disrupt traditional family structures or that women were not suited for political decision-making. Suffragists responded with organized protests, public demonstrations, and political lobbying. Their persistence demonstrates the power of collective action and civic engagement. The final ratification represented not only a legal victory, but also a shift in public attitudes about women's roles in society. The impact of the amendment was both immediate and long-lasting. Women gained the right to vote, which allowed them to influence elections and public policy. Over time, this led to increased representation of women in government and greater attention to issues affecting women and families. Additionally, the success of the suffrage movement served as a model for other social movements, including the civil rights movement. It showed that organized efforts could challenge inequality and bring about meaningful change, reinforcing the idea that democracy can evolve over time. From a philosophical perspective, the amendment is deeply connected to ideas about equality and natural rights. Thinkers like John Locke argued that all individuals are born with certain rights, including the right to participate in government. Denying women the right to vote contradicted these principles and raised important ethical questions about fairness and justice. The suffrage movement used these philosophical ideas to argue that women deserve equal treatment under the law. This shows how philosophical concepts can influence real-world political change. The ratification of the amendment helped redefine the meaning of democracy in the United States. It expanded the definition of who counts as a full participant in society. Ethically, it reinforced the principle that justice requires equal representation and opportunity. This shift was important because it challenged long-standing inequalities and set a precedent for future expansion of rights. The amendment demonstrates that democracy is not static, but can grow and become more inclusive over time. The cultural impact of the amendment extended far beyond politics. It contributed to changing perceptions of women's roles in society. As women gained the right to vote, they also began to pursue higher education, enter the workforce in greater numbers, and take on leadership roles. These changes gradually reshaped societal expectations and opened new opportunities. The amendment helped create a cultural shift towards greater gender equality, influencing many aspects of daily life. Even today, the impact of the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution remains highly relevant. Voting rights continue to be a topic of discussion, and issues related to gender equality are still being addressed. While the amendment was a major step forward, it did not solve all inequalities, and some groups of women, particularly women of color, continue to face barriers. This highlights the ongoing nature of the struggle for equality and the importance of continued civic engagement. In conclusion, the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution was a transformative moment in American history. It reflected the efforts of the women's suffrage movement and reshaped society by expanding democratic participation. By analyzing this event through both historical and philosophical perspectives, we can see how it not only changed laws, but also influenced ideas about equality, justice, and citizenship. Its legacy continues to shape our society today.